Welcome to the Benson Wealth Podcast. I take complex financial and economic topics and make it accessible to the everyday listener. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Benson Wealth Podcast. My name is Drew Benson. I'm the president and founder of Benson Wealth Management and a senior wealth advisor with Raymond James. I'm also the co-managing partner for True North Wealth Management Group, which is a platform for independent wealth advisors. I am a trained macroeconomist, and I'm currently a certified financial planner and wealth advisor. Now, today I had the distinct pleasure of interviewing Kristina Lengyel. Now, Kristina's story is incredibly inspiring, and today you're going to hear about how she started in poverty, living in Hungary. She lived behind the Iron Curtain, and she fled the country, fled through the Iron Curtain with her husband, and lived in a refugee camp for close to a year. She then found herself in North America. She worked in Canada in a steel mill, and then eventually ended up in America and truly achieved the American dream. Just to give you a couple of her past positions in corporate America, she was an executive vice president of corporate sales for OpenText. She was a senior vice president of global customer solutions for Tableau. And she also was a VP of global professional services at Kronos. In many of these organizations, she was just a few heartbeats away from the CEO job. She has a storied career, and she's a really wonderful human being. I hope you enjoy her story today. Kristina, welcome to the Benson Wealth Podcast. It's great to see you.
Lovely to see you as always, Drew.
You're an old friend of mine, so this is a whole lot of fun to be able to talk to you today.
Indeed.
We go way back, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. You are the son I never had.
Hey, I take that as an amazing compliment. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Love it. So I wanted you on the podcast because I think your story and your husband Geza's story is extremely inspiring. And obviously, we've known each other personally for quite some time now.
Absolutely.
And what I love about your story is you're an immigrant who ended up in America through Canada. You lived under communism in Hungary, and yet you made it to some of the highest levels of corporate governance that you could, right? And so before we get into your background with various tech companies, let's first start with your backstory, because I think if you're listening to this today, you're going to love to hear Kristina's backstory. And I'm personally fascinated by it, Kristina, because I've done a fair bit of my own studying of communism and socialism, etc. So you're from Hungary. Talk to us about what it was like to grow up in Hungary, and then tell us a little bit about the story behind leaving Hungary, etc.
Certainly. Clearly, I was born and raised in Hungary. And I was, part of that quote-unquote middle-class family. At the time, I considered that as a middle-class family, loving parents, grandparents around. We didn't have much, but we didn't starve. Like you hear a lot of stories that, there was so much suppression. And there are parts of the world at the time was definitely felt the economical suppression. I didn't feel it because I didn't know any better, right? So I didn't know what I could have had. So I considered my surrounding as the point of reference. So it's all about the point of reference, right? We were so much behind the Iron Curtain. Just like you look at North Korea, people in North Korea are just so completely uninformed that their surrounding is their point of reference. And if you're doing a little bit better, you are doing great, right? There is no way of understanding. So I grew up, went to high school. And it really is around high school when I started to feel off, right? My grandfather was one of the early communists. He was a Russian translator. His picture was in the museum. So every time our school outing went there, there was my grandfather on the pedestal. And my father was a communist based on his jobs he had to be. So I felt a little bit of pressure to be part of the party, for say. And you kind of automatically become the part of the party as you grow up. And then came high school, as I said, where you can actually opt in or opt out. And I said, what the hell, I'm going to opt out. right?
Rebellious teenager.
A rebellious teenager from, I met Geza and, just instilled
That
more
was the
rebellion.
problem. That was the problem. We know it.
Yeah, Geza was the instigator, for lack of a better term. So I kind of stepped out. I said, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to waste my time with these party meetings. I'd rather go and do something more fun, right? And I started to feel the utter isolation in high school. I couldn't be part of a lot of the meetings. I was uninvited from various groups, even academic groups. But I excelled very much in math and physics. So the school often relied on me to represent them in various academic championships to get some funding or recognition for the school. But beyond that, it was really no. And then it came really when the time for applying colleges and universities and trying to go and advance yourself. And I really wanted to be an engineer, right? I wanted to build bridges, actually. And when it came for application and entrance exam, I was pretty much told that either I am part of the party and, go on the party line, or I step aside and do some mundane labor things that no one wanted to do, right? And I was like, why? My brain power is the same. Either I'm carrying the red book, because we had that little red book, right? Or not. And I was utterly confused. And, someone who is this mysterious figure out there telling me that my dream cannot come through, no matter how hard I work, it's independent of my efforts, independent my intellect, independent my drive, it's done. Like, I'm done, right? And that's when I decided that no one's going to tell me what to do or how to advance. And that's when I decided, again, instigated by Geza, again, my husband, that I'm going to take my chances. I have nothing to lose. And this is very important when you have people, regardless of the decision, when people have nothing to lose, they're going to do things that normally you wouldn't do. And that's when I left. I decided to leave, finished my high school, got my diploma, and started to leave the country illegally. And I ended up in the refugee camp. I didn't know exactly where I'm going to go into, but what I knew is not what I wanted. So I rather take the unknown, because it couldn't possibly be worse, right?
Sure.
And when you start looking at some of these decisions, even though when I left with the thing in mind that I will never go back, I will never see my parents.
Wow.
I will never see my country, because at the time you were considered, a criminal. There was no going back. If you didn't know the wall's going to come down in a few years. So it was truly forever. The decision was forever.
And how old were you, Kristina, at the time?
18. I was 18 at the time.
And what year was it?
It was in 1986.
Okay.
And the interesting part is I waited until I became an adult by law in Hungary. So for my actions, my parents could not be punished, right? I couldn't tell them what I'm doing. So I consider myself a successful runaway. I couldn't tell them because I would put them in risk, because they should have been reporting me to the authorities if they would have known. But as an 18-year-old, they could not be held accountable and responsible for my own actions. Now, can they be postured and bothered and really being an outcast? Of course, they could be, but at least there was no legal action that could be taken against them. Couldn't be thrown in jail. It wouldn't stand in court, and so forth. So. I was 18 when I left, and I entered the refugee camp. And truly, in the refugee camp, you are entering no man's land. Okay, and it's still true today. No matter which country you go to, no matter what continent you go to, when you go into a refugee camp, even though they claim that it's maintained and controlled by either the UN or various religious organizations and so forth, there is no real law enforcement. It's no man's land. Countries provide the land, but it's not part of or under the authority of the country, unless you are committing some major crime. Of course, then it's all bets are off. That's the international law takes over, and they comply with international law. So when you enter these no man's land, you really are, it's all about surviving. It's all about your well-being. It's all about the toughest man or toughest woman on the block, and you are really checked out. And this is where you can actually decide to maintain your own identity or take on a brand new identity that no one's ever going to find you. Now, I maintain my own identity, so I am who I was born, but a lot of people chose not to for various reasons. And you wait, right? Just like you see in the news, immigration.
Just sitting there. Did you have a tent? Like what?
What
were you living in?
It was an old army base that was converted to a refugee camp. So there were a couple of buildings, but again, it's no cleaning. Everybody's temporary, so it's dirty, disgusting. So you're locked up initially. You're locked up for a period of time while they do serious background checks. So all the intelligence agencies out there, they get your paperwork, they do background checks. By international law, if you are a common criminal or murderer or
Sure.
anything such, they hand you off. Again, regardless of political affiliation, by law, they're going to send you back to the country you came from. Now, if you are a political immigrant, depends on your political views. If you're a spy, and we happen to actually bump into many of them that came and tried to do spying for their own country, they basically don't hand you back to your country, but they actually tell you that, in my case, Austria will not take you in, right? It's not a safe haven for you, and you can leave the country whichever direction you choose to leave, but you have to leave, right?
So you were in Austria. That was a question I had.
That was in Austria.
So you're in Austria. Okay.
Correct.
How long were you there, by the way?
We were there in isolation about 10 days, which is very quick for when they doing the background check. But again, I was young. I was very forthcoming who I am, where I came from, what my background is, who my parents are. So doing a background check was relatively easy for both me and Geza, because we didn't want to change our identity. That was not really the key here. And then for the remaining, we were there just a little over 8 months, which again, also extremely fast. Okay. So when you're there, you really choose various countries to apply for. Many countries I solicit immigrants, which X number of quota that they have to fill, and you can put your name in the hat. Our choice was U.S., Canada, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand. So our first choice was Canada, and our second choice was the U.S. As I said, we had no information about either countries. To me, America equaled Dallas, the show that you watch on television, because actually they did. We had an opportunity to watch Dallas. That was America for us, and Canada. That it was, other than it's north, it's a lot of trees. That was all you could find, right? So we decided to go for Canada because it was the friendlier version of it, and again, America, either Dallas or Colombo or Kojak, and we didn't want it to be shot at, right? at the time, because that's the affiliation association
Right.
with America
Bunch,
that we could fight.
bunch of cowboys with like revolvers on their hip.
Exactly, with guns roaming the streets.
So funny.
So then you wait, right? You wait. You really wait to be processed. And while you're wait, they give you, these organizations that sponsor the camps. They put you in a little bit better accommodation. So you're put out in a small, little motel-like facility, and you just wait. You can't work really. You can't do anything because you're technically just a temporary person seeking, immigration status by other countries. But clearly, you have no money. So, when you go to your new country, everybody wanted to do a little bit of work. So we tried to do, day labor. So I did planting potatoes, picking strawberries, picking cucumbers. Geza was helping out in various construction sites. In the winter time, we were shoveling snow in the street of Vienna, right, in the middle of the night. And there are a lot of people, a lot of especially young women, chose the easier path, which I don't have to tell you what that is. But sell their bodies and try to make a living by doing that. So I chose hard work instead because I wanted to really look myself in the eye. And that money was just, absolutely illegal. I'd be upfront about it. Those were illegal work that we did, but we did whatever we could because we wanted to save up some money when we land in a new country. We can establish ourselves. So it took us, as I said, a little over 8 months to get the paperwork and many interviews and, health checks and background checks. And they looked at the potential of what your contribution could be to the country that takes you in. And I was relatively young, and I always knew I wanted to continue with my education. So Canada took us in. Canada accepted us. And then one day we just got the call. The bus will pick you up in a couple of days. We'll take you to the airport, and you're going to Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. We had no idea where this place is, right? And on March 17, a bus picked us up, took us to the airport, and there was a whole bunch of immigrants coming in or refugees from various parts of the world. We ended up at the airport together. We got on the flight, and off we went. And then we landed in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario in March. And go ahead.
Before I'm just curious. Before you get into Canada, I want to back up just a teeny bit.
No
By the way,
problem.
March 17th, I think, was St. Patrick's Day, where there are a lot of
It
Irish
was.
people on the plane. Jeff McGinnis on the flight over. So when you're leaving Hungary, and then I want to get back to Canada. When you're leaving Hungary, what was it like actually trying to leave the country? How afraid were you? And then crossing, like getting through the Berlin Wall, what was that like, the border?
Yeah, so clearly we didn't cross the Berlin Wall, but we did cross the Iron Curtain in between Austria and Hungary. It was very interesting because I got a day pass. We got a day pass to go to Austria. That took us over 6 months to get a day pass. But it was illegally. And, if we were supposed to be back in a matter of hours or a day. And you're absolutely afraid because, leaving your country is illegal. Leaving it forever is illegal. The wall was ejected not to keep the West out, but keep the East in, right? It really is, there is a lot of confusion. No one from the West wanted to go to the East, and other than some of the really idealistic communists, which you can read about them and understand in the past how much regret they actually had after they crossed the border. But it's really about keeping people in. So when I crossed the border, it was very funny because clearly I was going for a day. And I had a relatively big suitcase, and I was supposed to be going out shopping with a small fund as a gift from Geza. It's going to take me on the shopping trip. But when we crossed the Hungarians, and they let me out, scrutiny, but I had the pass. They couldn't stop me. And interestingly enough, my dad is an immigration officer. Was
No
at
way.
the time, so
Wow.
so kind of everybody knows everybody, right? So we got across, and then the Austrian immigration officer opened my bag, and he looked at it, and all he found is 20 underwears and t-shirts and things like that. That it's like, so you're going for one day or a couple of days. Why do you really need this? And then it was so funny. He looked me in the eye, and he saw I was devastated. I like, please just don't send me back. I was ready to cry. It was the line. I could see the line I needed to cross.
Oh, wow.
And he closed it back. A young gentleman closed my bag, and he looked at me and he said, "Best of luck to you."
Wow.
And then he let me walk, and I walked the line. We walked the line across, and said, "Okay, I made it." So it was just truly amazing. He was one of the first really wonderful person that really changed my life. And I've been very, very lucky, Drew, that there are so many kind, generous, well-meaning people out there. A lot of people associate kindness and help with some economic advancements, like give me $20 or something. That this kindness was meaningful. The next kindness is when we ended up in Vienna, and we didn't know where the refugee camp is. Like you have no idea. So you walk up to a policeman, and this policeman, Lily, gave us his own money and told us which train to get on, which train stop to get off, to walk into the refugee camp, and escorted us on the way. It was meaningless cash, right? It's a wonderful thing, but just to helping out to get to know what you need to do next is something that you just don't find. So after we left, clearly I couldn't call home because I was in isolation, and you have no access. So my parents did not know anything about where I'm at, living or dying or made it across. They kind of suspected that probably I'm not coming back. Police shows up, Secret Service shows up at our houses. They basically threaten our parents, and they declare us criminals. Right? So we are definitely, on the book that you are considered a criminal. So even though after, the wall came down, it took a little bit of a while before we actually went back, and we did get amnesty, official amnesty from the country in 1990, right? 1990, late 1990, they sent an official letter that you are no longer considered a criminal. You're free to come and go as you wish. And congratulations, you are off the bad guys list. But we
did you have any sense that the wall was going to come down
No.
when you were leaving?
Oh God, no.
Were you? Because it wasn't that much longer. I mean, when did the wall come down?
It came down in 89, 90. When the wall actually started to fall apart. And interestingly enough is the pan-European breakfast that they call, which is the first crossing, was like 20 kilometers, about 15 miles from our house, that actually took place shortly after we left. But you had no inclination. You're towing the party line. You're surrounded by, media that is telling you communism here to stay, and the Soviet Union is gonna, take care of you, and don't worry, you'll be taken care of for the rest of your life and beyond, and life is wonderful, and so forth. So you had absolutely no idea. All I knew and all I cared about, I had a dream, and I couldn't follow my dream.
It's amazing. Okay,
and that was it.
So fast forward now, you
Sure.
get on this plane, and it's St. Patrick's Day, and you fly across the ocean, right? You land in Canada. What was it like when you got to Canada?
Oh, sorry, Susan Marie. It was not pretty, right? This is a steel town up in a very snowy part of Canada by the Great Lakes. So, you land middle of the night in this tiny, deprived little town. By the way, since then, it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. Don't get me wrong. But all I could see is, yucky snow. We were taken from the airport by a gentleman. An immigration officer picked us up. And he didn't speak Hungarian, we didn't speak English, so there was a lot of hand gesturing, and we were his first immigrants. By the way, we're still in touch with him, Jacques and Mona.
No way.
Wonderful. Every year, Christmas cards still being exchanged since 1986. This was 87, sorry. 87. Absolutely. This was, a wonderful, kind gentleman who picked us up and took us to this shitty motel, rented by the hour. So Giza and I are sitting there. It was dark, and he said, "What on earth did we do?" Right? That's the only time that I actually said, "Oh my God, I should just turn around and go home." Right? But we didn't. The next day was even worse because the sun came up and you saw how dirty everything is. But we said, look, we came this far, you're not going to stop. And the immigration officer, then not this young gentleman, but his boss, was not a very kind man. So he wanted us to start working right away. And they provided some accommodation. They rented us a hotel that we can get, or an apartment, small apartment we can get to, with basic necessity. Again, utterly grateful for everything that happened there. But he was not very kind because he asked us through translators, what do we want to do? And I said, I clearly came here to continue, follow my dream. And he looked me in the eye, again, through translators, said, we brought you to this country to work, not to study. And I said, here it is, the land of the free, and now they are telling me I can't do what I want to do. And I think it's very important even today. So I'm going to deviate a little bit, but I'll come back to the story. A lot of people who are for immigration still thinks, and you hear this, a lot of discussions, noise, not everybody, but a lot of people say, without immigration, we don't have all this cheap labor and people who are doing these mundane tasks. Let me tell you, no one comes to this country or Canada or anywhere to do your laundry, cut your grass, and be your servant. They come here because they have the American dream. Are they going to do that? Absolutely, they're going to do that. And I did it as well. I cleaned offices, I cleaned toilets, I picked a lot of more field work. And I did hard work, but not because that was my dream. My dream was, even if I can make it, I wanted to make sure that my daughter or my son or my children or grandchildren have a better life. So the dream doesn't stop there to come to this country and do meaningless tasks. They do it, and they're going to continue to do it because they want to better themselves. That's the American dream.
Yep.
Right? And they're going to continue to do that. And look, there is nothing wrong with that work. So back to this, and I said, look, I'm not going to, do that for long term. I'm going to, in parallel, I'm going to start doing schooling. And if you don't do it, don't help me, I'll do it on my own terms. And here is another kind gentleman who we bumped into, who is still the dearest, dearest friend of ours, who was initially a translator. He was a professor in the local college. We call him Chava, but his official name is Peter here. He looked at me and is just a sweetheart. He and his wife is just, I can't speak highly enough of them. And he looked at me, is like, so what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be an engineer because I really, love math and physics. That's good. And he walked away. This was in March. Long behold, he and his wife actually enrolled me into college without my knowledge. So I started college.
No way.
Oh, yeah. They took me in and they put me in the room. I had to write an entrance exam. I was in tears through because everybody looked at me like I don't belong, right? It was an engineering school, and writing the entrance exam, and I couldn't even say hello in a proper, way. And here I am, ready to take their spot. And I opened the book. I had no idea what it said. All I saw is a bunch of math equations. I said, well, probably they wanted me to fill out the form and solve these math equations, which I did. And then sure enough, the next day I said, I'm not going back there. Everybody laughed at me. I left the room much earlier than everybody. It was embarrassing. It was very unkind of you to put me in this situation. And Peter looked at me, and his wife, Aggie, looked at me, and he said, did you know anyone in that room? I said, no. Are you ever going to be with them? I said, probably not. Then he said, why do you care what they think about you? Why do you even bother worrying about your surrounding? And how they feel about you, or how they treated you, and how they laughed at you or not laughed at you. They don't matter. And some of these tiny little lessons along the line, it really, sits with you. And he taught me at that moment, just focus on what you need to do. Get on the path. If your heart and mind tells you this is the right thing to do, just go and do it. Nothing matters. No one else matters, right? So I did the entrance exam, and he said, just, by the way, since you don't care anymore, let's just see how you did. And I got accepted by the school, and we landed in March, and I started my college in September.
Was the exam in English?
Oh, everything was in English. So. And
you could barely speak English. Somehow you got through this exam.
Yeah. When we landed, I spoke not a word.
Wow.
So again, the nice thing is it was a bunch of equations and numbers and mathematical and physics signs, so I could understand what they wanted me to do. But beyond that, I had no idea. So in reality, that picked my career path.
That's right.
That exam, because I was in the belief that I don't speak enough of the language to actually start my higher education at the moment. So I said, well, give me a year, let me see how things are going, and then I'll decide what I'm going to do. But they said, why not? Even if you decide to change, and here is another lesson for you. Even if you decide to change later, At least you started. Again, you have nothing to lose by starting. Absolutely nothing, right? You're going to be surrounded by a whole bunch of English-speaking, like-minded people, and you're going to pick it up. And again, this was one of those other lessons that I take since then throughout my career. I thought it was a life-changing decision, right? Really, it wasn't. Because I could always drop out. I could always change my major. I could always, do something else. So it was relatively, at the time, it's seeming it's a big decision, but it really wasn't. It wasn't anything irreversible, right? Every decision you make have consequences, and you should evaluate your consequences. At this moment, my only consequences was I'm going to lose my year tuition fee. No big deal, right? But that's it. That's it. There was no major devastation that's going to come to me by trying, right? And when you think about the decisions you make every day, right? Very few things that you decide on that's irreversible. Okay, as I said, nothing comes with lack of consequences and so forth. But you have to quickly mitigate those risks. I always joke around. There is only one decision I made in my life that I can't reverse. That's having a daughter, right? I cannot have one, right? But I could move back to Hungary. I could change another path. I could sell my house. I could sell my car. I could divorce my husband. I can do a lot of things. Yeah, it has cost associated with it, but none of the decision that I made was, life and death, irreversible. Some of them easy, some of them harder, but it's a decision, yeah, and you have to make it, and you have to live with it, and change it if it doesn't work out.
So I want to tap into that because I think that's really important, Kristina. And one of the things I've noticed in people where I've watched maybe folks' careers stall, I've watched a lot of people's lives stall. In almost every instance, there's fear of making what appears to be an important or major decision. I would say something that's irreversible in nature.
Correct.
And that fear of making a bold move because they think there's going to be all these negative downstream effects. That fear is what actually leads them down to what can be a relatively lackluster life, a stalling career. And I think the ability, when I've interviewed highly successful people like yourselves, you all say the same theme, all of you. And the theme is take risk, make decisions. Don't be afraid of some of the consequences. Because the biggest regret, and this is a tiny bit cliche, but I think it's incredibly truthful, the biggest risk is regret of not doing something.
Correct.
If you do something and fall flat on your face, people don't regret the failure. Where I see regret in people's lives is they regret that they didn't even try something at all. They didn't give it a shot. And then 20 years goes by in a flash, and they wish, why didn't I leave that big firm and start I had that feeling like, I'm going to one day regret if I don't start my own investment firm. I'm going to regret it. I know I am. And so whatever the costs are, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this brings me to, our meeting point, right? This is why you are in my life in some ways, because I wanted to have the level of freedom to continue to do what I want to do, right? And, we talk about financial independence. And we talk about independently wealthy. Mm-hmm. Two different things.
Very.
Right? And our financial situation, and a lot of people's financial situation. That's your business. Mm-hmm. And you can very easily, and I say this is part of the American dream, you can easily achieve financial independence You don't have to have a high-paying executive position to do so. You don't have to be a millionaire to do so. But you have to understand, and you have to live within your means or below your means, whatever makes you feel comfortable. That when you are at work, and I had that very early on, and I achieved it thanks to you, partly to you, that I had the financial freedom that if I didn't like my job, and it's not about like, if my job put me in a position where I felt I had to jeopardize my personal integrity or something that didn't feel well with me, or it's against my belief or against my value, I had the financial independence to walk away. I'm not independently wealthy, but I'm financially independent.
That's right.
And I think it's a very important thing to know that, and it should be taught early in school on how to do that management and how to achieve the financial independence. And I'm not talking about being debt free. I'm not talking about, being a millionaire. I'm not talking about not having a mortgage. It's very different. And whatever it is, you have to decide for yourself what that financial independence. But it's freeing. It's absolutely freeing to make you do things that you want to do, and you can further uphold your own personal integrity, and you achieve that true freedom. Everybody talks about the American freedom and independence. You have that. You can achieve that. Look at me and look at millions of people. I have work being done in the house. I have wonderful people who are first and second generation immigrants, tradesmen, absolutely high quality tradesmen, achieve the financial freedom within short period of time entering the workforce. Right? So again, you came to my life in the very good time, good point. And one of the things I gained from you and people like you is that level of education that I didn't have or couldn't, receive it. I wasn't born with it. So I had to rely on people like yourself to continue to educate me on how to continue to maintain that financial independence. Right?
Well, it's all highly specific, right, Kristina?
Absolutely.
And I think we create these. I've always had a disdain for rules of thumb in finance. Rules of thumb for who and why. And when I think about each individual that I've, hundreds of people over the years that I've had as clients or I've counseled, the first thing you have to figure out is, well, what kind of lifestyle do you want to achieve? And it's not just a financial lifestyle. It's what does life look like? When you wake up retired and it's Monday morning and you're out on the porch with a cup of coffee, what is life going to feel like? And money, again, is just a tool. It's a resource to fulfill a specific lifestyle that you so desire to help you achieve the American dream that you really were able to achieve. And for some people, it needs to be 50 million to achieve the lifestyle that they want. And good luck. And some of them are going to do it. And then for others, honestly, it's a simple lifestyle with a little cabin in the woods. And and by the way, freedom is such a preference-based idea because to some people, freedom is achieving great heights with corporate success or a career. And to others, freedom might be the ability to stay home with your children. So for some people, it might be a simple lifestyle in the hills of West Virginia, and they just want they want to go fishing on Saturday, and they don't want the pressure of a pressure cooker job. And so I appreciate you saying that, because everything is highly personalized in my world, and you got to figure out what you want, and then you plug the money into that whole situation. Absolutely.
And remember early on we talked about this, the point of reference. When I was in that isolation in my family unit, I felt good, right? Because that was my point of reference. And I think it's important, just like ignoring everything else outside, you have to have a point of reference within yourself. If you want to buy an expensive car, buy it. If it makes you happy, if it makes you feel good about yourself, go for it. Right? It's not to deprive yourself. But the point is that, as you said, it's very personal. Find it within. If you want to compete with your neighbor or you want to compete with your work peers, which, by the way, you know nothing about because they will not let you into their private life. So you don't know how they achieve a certain standard of living, or is it maintainable? Mm-hmm. Then you are finding happiness based on someone else's point of reference.
That's right.
So again, don't deprive yourself. As you said, if it takes you 50 million to be happy, go for it, find it, fight for it. But if not, then you decide what that financial freedom is for you, or what's the lifestyle that makes you happy. But if you continue to try to find or look for a point of reference,
yep,
outside of your own self, you're never going to achieve it, by the way, ever.
So there's a great French philosopher, René Girard, and he had a term called mimesis, and it was, a caution, right, that so much of people's identities are predicated on, mimesis just means mimic, right? So many people are trying to mimic others that they see, and they're trying to achieve a lifestyle or a sense of status, because we are by nature creatures that like to mimic. And so we often decide that, okay, this is what success looks like because my neighbor belongs to the country club. My neighbor's got the new BMW. My neighbor's got this position. And then if you were to dig maybe into and this is not I don't have a neighbor like this, by the way, so I'm not, this isn't a real story. I like my neighbors, by the way, for the most part. If you dig into this situation, right, with this character I'm describing, sometimes you get into their life and you see financial stress, you see marital problems, the kids don't like each other, they don't like you, you're unhappy. But this instinct in our human nature is to copy somebody else and to create and to forge an identity for yourself that isn't you and is based on someone else's potentially miserable lifestyle. And so when it comes to true, I would say spiritual, emotional freedom, don't copy other people.
No.
You can copy them to an extent. There's some things that we all should mimic, like good behavior and virtue, but there's other aspects of you definitely don't want to play the keeping up with the Joneses game because it can be a pretty miserable pursuit for your soul.
No. And you have to understand, you are not a lesser human being because your dream is more confined to something that makes you happy and not necessarily competes with, your neighbors or your peers or your coworkers or people you bump into in the country club, right? So it's important. It's hard though. It's very, very hard. But
it is hard.
It appears at work more than not. You work with individuals, and I know you want to talk about how to get from point A to point B, right? In your career, how do you advance? I think that's also very important that you take this lesson into how you approach work, right? People often ask, how do you know, or how do you advance, right? One of the things you have to understand, again, it's all about pleasing or point of reference or trying to understand other people as opposed to focusing what's right. Don't try to read people's mind, right? You're never going to read them. I always joke, I've been with my husband for 40 years. He still cannot read my mind. Now, he's a man, so I can read his.
Yeah. Right? I'm sympathetic to gays.
But don't try to read other people's mind and take action based on what you think they want you to do. Focus on doing the right thing. Focus on the problem at hand and not the person. Other people want to be pleased. Of course they want to be pleased, right? But one, you don't know what it takes to please them, so communicate. Two, if you focus on the right thing, ultimately everybody wants to be successful. And if you make a project successful, if you're working on the project, or you make a company successful, or whatever you're working on, if that task is completed to a success, measurable success, tangible, measurable success, then the people around you are going to be absolutely pleased. And it's, again, focusing on the task, not focusing on what other people want you to do. Right? And you will get the recognition because they will say, okay, looks like she or he is always working on a successful project. They may say. It doesn't, then they start realizing they are successful because you are focusing on the task at hand, not on other people. And trust me, if people or your boss does not recognize that kind of approach, then you should move. Like you should find another boss, right?
Dust off your sandals.
But most of the time, individuals who achieve the higher level, which means they are above you, they will recognize your accomplishment. Sometimes it needs to be pointed out, but again, it's all about the communication. So you just focus on that, and you focus on that, use that as a point of reference. And, you're going to achieve success over time. Now, you still should have a dream that success look like, right? It's not for your boss. Your boss is not going to determine your success. It's not your coach or whatever that is. It's you. And set a goal, If you want your CEO's job, just put, I want to be CEO X, and drive toward that. But again, use your everyday task to get to that level of success every day, and you're gonna get there. And if the boss doesn't recognize it, you're in the wrong job. Move on.
Yep.
Go to the next one. But don't underestimate people, because most of the time people don't come to work just to be pleased or put on a pedestal. They want to achieve things, because no matter how high you get, there is someone else higher. Or, even if you are a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company, there's a board of directors, there is, the trading floor that's going to judge you. Everybody's going to judge you. So everybody wants to be successful. So there is always someone else above someone else that's above you, that's gonna judge performance, not how pleased or how happy you are or how content you become.
It's very true. So I want to finish your personal story really quickly, and then I wanted to ask you a few other questions today.
No problem.
So you're in Canada. And correct me if I'm wrong on this story, my understanding is you worked in a factory and you did a few things to assimilate in the factory. And then let's just take 5 minutes on this, and then I want you to talk about, you made it to America, and then what companies did you end up at, and what did you do for those companies? So let's go to the factory. Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah. My very first job, official job, like formal job, full-time job, was in the steel mill in Regina, Saskatchewan. And I met the kindest, nicest, most forthcoming people I ever met in my life. I was clearly in management. Our task was to automate the factory, to do a lot of investment and automation within the factory. And the first step was really to do performance management, meaning really find the most important task first to be automated. So, here I am, 21 by this time. I end up in Regina, Saskatchewan, cold place in the world. And I enter this steel manufacturing facility, and some of the people have grade 6 education, right? So here I am. I'm a woman. There's no women bathrooms anywhere in the factory facility. I'm young. I'm 21. The average age is probably 50, 55. because it's unionized. So it's a small community. It's hard to get in. You wait until someone retires. So I'm young, and I'm a foreigner. I mean, with a very thick accent. And lastly, I am there to tell them how to do their job going forward.
Oh, man.
So anything that could go against you were going against you. But they were extremely welcoming. Not kind initially, I can tell you that. Because every day, I set up a monitor monitoring the furnace temperatures and the alloy additions and doing a lot of the automation for the melt shop, taking that manual lever for the big ladles and switching it off for a keyboard. The next morning I came in, usually those equipments disappeared. And I often ask the people, it's like, okay, what happened? They looked at me, alloy addition. Meaning it ended up in the furnace as one of the alloy buckets, because they threw it into the furnace. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do shift work. So I ended up doing the 12-hour shift. I sat in the control units with the melters, and I hoarded my equipment, and we got into a lot of discussion, a lot of conversations. And they absolutely told me when I effed up, and in a harsh way. There was no sugarcoating. So I learned a lot of, swear words and in that time. But they were so kind. I could go into the restroom. If someone was around, they stood in the door, waited until I finished my business so no one would come in. Just a little kindness. All of a sudden, they knew I had very little at the time. They showed up on my desk with a lunch box, for lunch for a 12-hour shift. They called me on my birthday on midnight, and all the sirens, they set it off, the cranes and furnace, and every siren is like, awesome. Try to, mimic the happy birthday, and they hung up on me. They were just generous, kind, forthcoming. And what I enjoyed about it, when you screwed up, you screwed up. The knife was coming to your chest or through your forehead, never to your back, right? It was, expectation was set, expectation was maintained. And, but this was Saskatchewan. It's, we all know that Canada collects a lot of taxes, and Saskatchewan, on top of the provincial tax was very, very high. And this is the time when we reached the North American Free Trade Agreement, and with that created an opportunity for me to come to the States and work in the States legally. So I came down under a TN status, later achieved a green card. Started to work for Monsanto, initially in Sault Ste. Marie, as a consultant doing automation. And from there on, really worked for high-tech companies in the Boston area. Mm-hmm. After I moved to the Boston area, I worked for PTC briefly. I spent a lot of time at Kronos, now UKG, wonderful, wonderful company. I can't speak highly enough of the organizations and past and current leadership as well. I know they are having some challenges, but trust me, they will overcome. I worked for a company like OpenText, largest Canadian tech company, wonderful, wonderful Canadian spirit, good financial management, just really a wonderful companies along the way. That just naming few. I started really in engineering, but then I started to switch for professional servicing, meaning taking the technology and really facilitate the rollout in various industries, various organizations. So I mainly worked with their customers. I again became that translator, translating the technology to business outcomes as opposed to focusing on technology deployment, focus on achieving business outcomes, leveraging technology, which is very different. And I think that's what people are really should be focusing on. So I was back and forth. So with engineering, bringing customer centricity to an engineering organization, and with services or professional services, consulting services, to really bring in a lot of automation and acceleration of achieving business outcome, tangible business outcomes for organizations. From a small organization to, three and a half thousand people organization, managing from small projects to multi-million-dollar project, managing the largest budget of $2 billion before I left. So it's in any range.
So did you have any sense that your life would be this radically successful, that you would get to some of the highest levels of corporate success? You in some instances were a few heartbeats away from being CEO. What were your goals, right? So you leave Canada, you're working in this factory, you end up in America, you end up with some high tech, working for these high tech companies. Did you have a stated goal of like, I want to be this woman one day, or did life just sort of take off for you?
So I always have a goal. There's always a sticky on my one of my monitor is the next. But my original goal throughout immigration and after I landed in Canada, as I said, I bumped into this wonderful professor at the local college who was making some money, but my goal was, I want to make between $45,000 to $50,000. I want to have my own house. I want to have 2 cars, and I want to have a child, healthy child. That's it. That was my goal.
The American dream.
The American dream. And guess what? Everything else is extra. So I can look at you and I can say, I am a successful runaway whose dream came true.
That's cool.
Right? And everything else is extra. And of course you move the bar. Absolutely you move the bar. But, when I get frustrated or, why can't I do this? Or why didn't I achieve that? And I just step back and I said, wait a minute, this is extra. Right? So my dream has come true. I achieved everything I initially set out to achieve. And from there on, I never jeopardized my values. I never, sold my integrity to anybody for any money. And everything else is just extra. And it's wonderful.
Is the American dream still alive?
Yes.
A lot of people say it's dead.
No, it's not.
You can't make it. You can't make it in this country anymore. I had a woman at a consulting firm kind of challenged me that she said the American dream was dead, and
absolutely not.
She's kind of a jaded person. What do you think?
Absolutely not. The American dream is still real. As I said, people are still coming legally, hopefully, and they still have the opportunity. I still, even my last job, I used to stay long, and I used to sit down with the cleaning facility or people who working on the kitchen and so forth. They are absolutely here to make a difference. They absolutely going to put their kids through college. They absolutely going to become the future doctors and lawyers and hopefully presidents or politicians or academics or researcher or whoever they want to be. There is no reason for you to think and that it's not, right? Is it as easy as it was 20, 30 years ago? Probably not. But I think it's still possible. I am here to prove it to you. And I am one of the millions, not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, millions, whose dream actually came through. And it's not easy, but it's still possible. You still have to work very hard at it. but there is no reason why you can't buy your house. It may not be on Beacon Hill, it may not be in Manhattan, but you can still buy your own house, and you still can put your kids through a wonderful education, and you can still, buy your car, you buy your boat, you can buy your, if that's what makes you happy, you can achieve the financial independence in a relatively short period of time, if you set your goal correctly.
Let's go back to communism for a minute. So you obviously, Kristina, and this is a topic I care about a lot.
Yep.
And we'll wrap up. We'll take 10 minutes and we'll wrap with this. So you leave communism, which is built on a socialistic system.
Absolutely.
And so let's just call it what it is. You left socialism. What do you say to a growing number of oftentimes American-born kids and even adults that are starting to flirt more with the ideas of socialism? And you're also seeing candidates that are running platforms that are explicitly socialistic, or they used, veiled terms, but we know it's socialism. What do you say to the people that think capitalism is a bad system, socialism is the compassionate route? Are they right? And what's your experience leaving a socialistic country?
Look, be aware, right? Socialism is very, very dangerous. Communism is very, very dangerous. It's extremely idealistic, and it's not practical. Okay? You manage your own wallet, and why on earth would you want someone else to take care of you when you can take care of yourself? Right? You go to college. It's like parenting. I want to watch my child fail, but I want to be there to grab her and make sure she's okay. I really think she's doing great, for example, but it's very idealistic and it's not sustainable, right? Everybody talks about free education and free healthcare. I would love that, absolutely. And there are a lot of socialist countries that sell that dream. Nothing is free. You pay for it. Their taxation is very, very high. The lines are long. Would I love to have better childcare? Absolutely, I would. But you're going to have to pay for it. And just like you're managing your own personal wallet, right, in your pocket, the states, federal agencies, everybody has to manage theirs, right? The money has to come from somewhere. So when someone tells you that I'll take care of you and I'll pay for you, you always have to ask, why would you do that? Because remember, you give up that level of control and they're going to tell you what to do next. And no one should tell me what to do next, right? And those are, as I said, it's not sustainable. Plus, I'm an intelligent human being. I don't want to be told, right? If you're looking for that level of guidance and coaching and so forth, instead of changing America, go to somewhere where it is alive. I'm not saying leave the country. I'm not trying to be rude, but go and experience. Going on a holiday is not good enough. Go live there for a year, right? And if it suits you, fantastic. But be informed, for love of God. Be informed. My grandfather, as I told you, was an absolute idealist communist. Then my dad became a communist because he had to. Guess what? My father, I love that man to death, right? Never, ever, ever told me that enter the party. He always said, do what's best for you. And I'm just, you read Marxist books, you read Lenin's books, you read Pluto's books, you don't have to go too far. And you just say, damn, it sounds good. It does sound good. And then you say, okay, how is it going to be sustained? Who's going to take care of me? Like, where is that coming from? And if I'm going to take their money, do I have to accept their idealism? And some of it is very, very dangerous and evolves over a generation. And what I'm saying is, if it suits you, fine, but be informed and read and educate. And please do listen to a different point of view. Because practically, some of the things, it's not practical, it's not sustainable. And you're going to be doing a disjustice to the future generation when you do that. It's no different than, we judge helicopter parenting. Do you want your mother to look after you, when you go to college and wipe your butt and take care of your bills and so forth? It doesn't feel so good after a while.
No, it's not really a very free life. It's not a very free life.
It's not. And you know what? You talk about compassion. You say, okay, socialism is considered compassionate. Compassion is not an action. Okay? It's a feeling. Okay? And what I'm trying to tell you, you can feel compassionate and do absolutely nothing. You make no difference in anybody's life. I feel sorry for you, or I envy you, or I whatever. That's not an action. Compassion is not actionable. Tell me, what are you going to do tangibly? How are you going to better my life tangibly? If you just talked not long ago about comparing yourself to your neighbor. Mm-hmm. Don't tell me I have to make the same amount of money as my neighbor. Don't tell me the standard of living that my neighbor accomplished is what I should be thriving for. If that would have been a case, I would have been back in Hungary. I would have never left because I was taken care of. Unemployment at the time was illegal. So technically, I always knew I'm going to have a job. I may not like it, but you know what? Under communism, no one gave a damn. You come and go. They're going to give you a job. They're going to give you a certain level of income. And, your well-being is going to be taken care of. But that was not good enough for me. That was not enough for me. And you have to ask yourself, is it enough for you? And if not, then you have to take control. And you are not to expect someone else to control that. So be aware. All I can tell you is I'm not going to tell you against socialism or against the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. You make your choice. I can't vote, so it doesn't matter what I think. I can't influence it as an immigrant yet. But make your decision, but be aware. And you have to put your practicality hat on and say, is it practical enough? Is it sustainable enough? Because a lot of people say, okay, well, they're going to take care of me. Who are the they?
Yeah.
Right? They're going to take care. Who?
The party?
Who? Exactly. The party. The party is not going to take care of you. They're going to take care of themselves.
What incentive do they have? I think the reason I wanted to ask you this too, Kristina, is that so few people understand the tangible, the tangible historical examples of socialism, right? Like people, for instance, didn't realize that Hitler was an ardent socialist.
Oh, absolutely.
He was an ardent. His party was the National Socialist Party. It's what Nazi stands for. Didn't realize that Mussolini was a socialist. Now, they had elements of a market economy, and they kind of rebranded it as fascism. But fascism is truly just that socialistic cousin. But it's still predicated on heavy centralization and largely the state intervening into a private economy. Obviously, with socialism, the state just owns the means of production. And to your point, I think a lot of these systems on paper sound reasonable and compassionate and nice, but then you have to look and say, but did people actually get fed? Particularly in the early days of communist Russia.
Absolutely.
And I use this statistic a lot. From 1917 to 1921, when the Russian Revolution had ended and the Reds took over, and that 4-year period, and this is old knowledge, so don't quote me totally as on this, but my understanding is 10 million people died just from economic inefficiencies with the farming system.
Yeah.
right? And then you've got Stalin later, who also brought in. But people often think of the authoritarian nature of socialism as what maybe led to the economic problems. What they don't realize is actually it started with economic problems.
Absolutely.
And incredible human toil throughout. And another great example is, the Great Leap Forward with Mao Zedong, where in a matter of a couple of years, some estimates have said 30 to 40 million people died in a matter of a few short years because of this initiative known as the Great Leap Forward, which is a completely disastrous agricultural policy. So we can talk all we want about these grand schemes with a socialistic model, but when you look at the historical record, it's not a pretty one. And I just want open and again, I appreciate you saying it's like we're not trying to tell you whether to be a capitalist or socialist or Republican or a Democrat. That's not what we do. But we want you to at least be educated on the historical record. And so few people remember anything about communism. And that's why I wanted you on today, too, of like your experience of fleeing Hungary and what it was like to go through the Iron Curtain. You know it, you lived it, Kristina.
Absolutely. And, you brought up Hitler for a second. It's called the National Socialistic Party. And he knew, I don't want to give him any credit, but he knew that he had to put the nationalistic in the beginning, because by itself, remaining a socialist party, he would have never made it.
Correct.
Absolutely never made it. And what made it is that putting that nationalistic spin on it. But as you said, a lot of the time, a lot of these are evolving. And, to be again, I don't want to derail this conversation, but the EU is becoming extremely like the Soviet Union used to be, controlling every country that's the member, telling them exactly what to do, how to do things, what industry they can invest and evolve and develop, and what not. They are taking their complete independence, financial independence away, and they are sold and contributing to the greater good because they want to compete with the United States or so on. They are not the United States. They are the EU. I often say United States, when United States was formed and continue to be evolving, we immigrants come here. We gave up in some ways, not forgive, but just give up our identity. We gave up our home, and we are here because we want to change. We want something different. But when you are trying to enforce some level of change, your lifestyle, your ethnicity, your religion, whatever freedom that you have within your home, without signing up for that change, you are being suppressed. And these countries, just like under Soviet Union, EU is starting to suppress some of these countries, both economically and now by law, enforcing their laws and their values on the member of this conglomerate. How is that different what the Soviet Union did? It's not. It's just in the early stages. Look, Soviet Union was wonderful when it started. We were getting free coal. We were getting free this, free that. And then we had to give up a lot of the factories, and not just we, meaning Hungarians, a lot of other, every member, right? Because you're going to be taken care of until you're not. Until you not matter anymore, right? And I feel that unless we really focusing on the Constitution in the U.S. and be true to our core values, and again, leaves room for interpretation, no doubt about it, and I'm not a Constitution lawyer, but I read it all the time to remind myself, right? Then you have to ask yourself again, is it sustainable? Is it the best thing to do for my child, my grandchildren, my legacy? Because they are your legacy. your kids, your grandkids, your great grandkids? Am I doing them a favor? And, everybody said, yeah, because I'm taking care of them. But are you really? No, you relinquish your responsibilities, you relinquish your right, you relinquish your decision to this figure of the they that no one knows who they are. And, then what? Then who are you going to blame? Because you're going to blame them. Who are them? So, it's a dangerous path. That it may seem idealistic, it may seem compassionate, it may seem that this is the right thing to do by your values or by your faith, but is it really? Or just try to be a good person and control yourself and control your family and take care of yourself and get on the American dream and achieve what you want to achieve.
Well, Kristina, I love everything you're saying. I couldn't agree more with you. And you are a great Hungarian, but you're truly Absolutely. A great American. You've lived here for so long, and I know you're not legally an American. I think you would make a great legal addition to this country, if I say so myself. You. But you have given much to America, right? Much. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And America's given you a whole lot back, which is one of the beautiful things about our country.
Absolutely.
So.
As I always say, Drew, and we can wrap on that note, or you can comment on that. I'm here. I am a guest in this country for now with a green card. I am legal. I will respect your flag. I will obey your laws. I will pay your taxes. And I will defend your border because you took me in.
That's inspiring, Kristina. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you very much, Drew.
If you've enjoyed this content and you're looking for a wealth advisor, or if you're a financial advisor and you're looking to make the jump to the independent side, please message me on LinkedIn. Or you can email me at drew.benson@bensonwealthmgt.com. Or lastly, you can call my office at 603-316-2544. Securities offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Benson Wealth Management and True North Wealth Management Group are not registered broker-dealers, and they are independent of Raymond James Financial Services. The foregoing information has been obtained from sources considered to be reliable, but we do not guarantee that it is accurate or complete. It is not a statement of all available data necessary for making an investment decision, and it does not constitute a recommendation. Any opinions are those of myself and not necessarily those of Raymond James. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Investing involves risks, and you may incur a profit or loss regardless of strategy selected.